G'day boys, Stem28 looks at the stages of skill acquisition. So let's just get this slideshow cranking. And as you can see here, there's three stages of skill acquisition: cognitive, associative and autonomous. And putting that into English, you're looking at the learner or the beginning stage, intermediate and advanced, if you want to put it like that. So let's just have a look. What we need to look at is what's involved in each stage and what are the characteristics of an athlete who would be at each stage of learning. So here's where you'll kick off your notes. Now, the cognitive stage, where the athlete is the beginner, and as you can see from this little explanation, the cognitive bit refers to the fact that there's a lot of thought involved from the athlete because they don't know the skill, so they really have to concentrate and really have to think hard about what's required to perform the skill. Because, like I said, because they don't know, because they're only learning the skill. There's a lot of errors made during this stage because the athlete is just learning. And coaches need to give feedback, but they need to make sure that the feedback is specific and preferably short and sharp, so that there's not a lot of information going to the athlete because they can only process a certain amount of information. Any reference to other sports that's mentioned here will help the athlete with their learning, so a bit of positive transfer of learning may occur. Feedback to the athlete needs to be maximised when they see something positive. So when a coach sees something positive, they need to make sure that they reinforce that to the athlete, because the athlete may not know what they've done, but if the coach gives them a specific pointer, say that was really good how you kept your head down while you hit that ball, then the athlete says, oh, okay, well that's what must have made that shot good, so they can remember to do that when they're performing the skill again. Important to note here, the athlete can't really self-correct their errors because they don't know the skill, so they don't know why the skill has not come out the way they would like it to have come out. They know it was a bad performance, but they don't know what they've done to make it bad, and they don't know what they've done or what they can do to make it better. So they don't have that sort of internal feedback yet. All they know is they've just executed a skill pretty poorly. So very disjointed, very erratic, no smooth flowing movements, and a lot of errors, as I mentioned before. The second stage of learning, here's a little picture of an athlete trying to understand the key points of running. Just there are four things that an athlete may focus on. And there's probably some other points as well. But that's just a simple example of an athlete in the cognitive phase. The associative stage of learning is the second stage, so the intermediate stage. And once an athlete reaches this level, they've got a lot more accuracy in their performance, as opposed to the lot of errors they're making in the cognitive stage. And they also start to know more about the game they're playing, so they can put the skill into a movement situation and into a game-like situation because they're reasonably confident with performing the skill, so they can also now adapt it to a more open type training session. So open meaning there's other variables like e.g. defenders, and other attackers and things like that, other teammates, referee, rules, all that sort of thing. And obviously the more an athlete can practice in an open environment, then the better they're going to become at performing the skill in a game situation. Just over to the next slide. The athletes start to feel what the skill is like, so feel what the successful execution of the skill is like, and that's known as the kinesthetic sense. And that's the key difference between the associative stage and the cognitive stage. As I mentioned before, in the cognitive stage, the athlete doesn't know what a good performance feels like. They don't have that internal feedback, but whereas by the time they've reached this stage, they do. So that's what separates the good performers from the not so good performers. So they pick up their own errors and they can self-correct. They know instantly what they've done wrong and they can correct that through that kinesthetic sense. And just important to note here that open skills require more practice than closed skills because of their unpredictability. I mean, that sort of goes without saying. But that's the associative stage. Now, the final stage is the autonomous stage, and as the name sort of suggests, the execution of the skills becomes pretty much automatic, in that the athlete doesn't have to think about the actual skill itself too much because they've been doing it for a long period of time and they've mastered that skill. Which enables them to focus on other things. If it's a rugby league player with a pass, he can focus on
where his attacking players are in relation to him, where their defence is, whether they're backing off or whether they're rushing up, and what he needs to do. So the elite athletes reach the autonomous stage, which gives them more time to execute. You'll hear of cricketers, being described as, oh, he's got a lot of time to perform his shot. Well, that's because he's in the autonomous stage and he doesn't have to actually think about performing the shot. He can worry about where the ball's pitching, where the field is in relation to him, and so on. So, like I said, the execution skill is automatic. There's very few errors. They are really, really consistent with their performance, and the actual execution of the skill is a nice, smooth, flowing sort of movement. And these athletes will self-correct again, but at a greater level than those in the associative stage. And it means that they can, as I said, worry about other things. Now, just on to the last slide. Important to note, even though the athletes have reached this stage, they must continue to practice to maintain that level, to maintain motor skill memory. Like a golfer doesn't just win the US Masters and then stop practicing. He would still have to keep practicing and practicing. Otherwise, he will regress back to the associative stage. Probably not to the cognitive, but back to the associative. And the main difference between the associative and autonomous is the number of errors. Autonomous, there's far fewer errors made in this situation. Not everyone reaches the autonomous stage. If we all reach the autonomous stage, then we'd all be elite athletes. So only the very best can reach autonomous. Sometimes we'll execute a skill, e.g. we'll go and play golf, and we'll hit a golf drive and it'll be absolutely beautiful, textbook, down the middle, 300 metres, okay, not that far, but 250 metres. That in itself is an example of someone in the autonomous stage, but if we then go to the next hole and the next hole and the next hole and we don't do those good drives, that means we're probably not as good as we thought we were. We're in the associative stage because we're still making some errors. Here's an example. There's a netballer, an Australian netballer, so her performance will just be consistently good. She would be classified as being in the autonomous stage of learning. Another example of people in the autonomous stage of learning would be myself and Mr. Brennan on Year 12 retreat when we're playing table tennis. Obviously two very gifted athletes there, and two athletes at the top of their game in the autonomous stage. But thanks for listening, boys. I hope you learned something there.